GhazzyTV here with another Path of Exile video. In this one, we're going to talk about the patch notes for 3.21 Crucible. I'm going to give you a TLDR of the things that stood out the most for me instead of reading through the entire shit. So the things that stood out the most for me were a couple things, and obviously we're going to tackle a lot of minion stuff in this video real quick, and I'm going to talk about the Poison SRS first. And that basically brings us to a very easy answer. The changes to United in Dream was quite extensive to it. There's some rather cool changes to it, such as the removal of all stats, the minion damage, which is also removed from the upgraded version. The poison on hit is removed from the non-upgraded version. And instead, we're now getting the level 25 enemy still. However, we are getting 60% chance to inflict withered on hit, which is literally whatever. And they get 5% crit multi per wither to debuff on an enemy, which is equivalent to 75% crit multi. Now, what's really good for SRS specifically is that they are extremely strong on a hit-based version, not going chaos or poison as it is. So I think it will be very fine to play with SRS all the way till you're able to afford going into a United Dream to be able to run the poison strategy. Now, do keep in mind there's some changes to things like Darkness and Throne, which I'll cover in a little bit in this video, that makes it a little bit easier for us to achieve the 100% chance to poison with the use of the support gem chance to poison support, which means that we could run a 7 in sleep weapon instead and sort the poison chance through those means instead. And this is done through the GHAZZY eye jewels, obviously, so there is a possibility for us to do so. However, I will say that early game, low budget version of this build will be playing without poison, and it's not going to be that much of a big difference in terms of your efficiency that you're bringing to the table for the build. Obviously, when it comes up to upgrading that type of build into medium budget or high budget version, Poison SRS will very likely be the way to go. Now, which build to promote for this? Well, obviously, we're going to go for the Balor Mage Poison SRS build, and I will, in the coming days, make sure that you guys have a written build guide for Balor Mage build updated and posted in the guide section. You can see the link to all of my guides in the descriptions below. So I did mention some other buffs, which is the buff they're putting onto Darkness and Throne, which is actually really cool. Now, Darkness and Throne scales all the Ghastly Eye Jewels, well, all the Abyss Jewels, rather, inside the build for 75%, and the changes they've done is quite extensive to Abyss in general, which means we should see a lot more of these items in the market. But Darkness and Throne specifically now has a new value rolling between 50 and 100%, which means we can get even stronger Darkness and Throne belts for our minion builds, which is a significant buff, but it's also an insane buff for builds such as Dark Pact, which is really cool to see. Another thing I wanted to mention is that they have basically gutted a lot of reduced mana reservation efficiency from masteries, such as the reservation mastery for determination. If I can find it somewhere. Don't have it there, doesn't matter. So basically they're removing these from the actual list of things, which is rather insane in my opinion to witness, because it seems like they've removed a lot of these cool things from mastery nodes, such as Determination RMR or Clarity RMR. Let's do for Grace, for example, has this removed as well, and banner skills, etc, etc. So a lot of these things have been taken away from the masteries, which is rather sad, but they have added in the mana mastery section, they've added 12% RMR efficiency of your skills. Now, what's really interesting with this is that this should alleviate a lot of pressure for lower budget builds to introduce these auras for them, because not only are you going to be able to have this effect on your determination, your grace, your clarity, or whatever you want to run with, but it actually applies to all of your auras. So without seeing the actual numbers and how it will be in game and playing with PoB, I think this will pan out to be rather good in terms of a balanced approach for lower budget, but it will definitely have an impact on the higher investment for your higher budget characters. More of that later when we are able to play around with it in Path of Building, though. Another thing to mention is that in the video trailer for the 3.21 notes, I'm going to show you an image here real quick, is this little screenshot. Mastery Overhaul. And this, my friends, is a minion offensive mastery. Now, I've been able to confirm that this artwork was incorrectly slipped through the cracks and got into the reveal video, because minion mastery, offensive mastery, is not in the patch notes, but something that we'd rather, or will be able to see very likely in the 3.22 patch notes instead. So yeah, that sucked dick. Okay. Anyways, so with that out of the way, we do have some pretty crazy changes to the Saboteur. If I can get there, Saboteur, here we go. Saboteur! There's a lot of cool things changing here. So no longer is a cookie cutter approach for traps and mines, but rather giving them some more options for outside of traps and mines play styles or builds in general. What really is concerning me here is that the new notable Like a Clockwork is providing 30% CDR. And it's just absolutely disgusting. I mean, we're talking craziness when it comes to builds like trigger builds or cock builds in general. But it does open up the possibility for things like Poet's Pen or even Spell Slingers, potentially. But what it means to me, from my perspective, is that I think we're going to see a lot of people playing Trickster or Assassin and just using Forbidden Jewels in the higher budget characters, sniping off that Like a Clockwork notable. Obviously, I'm pretty sure that this Forbidden Jewel will be very expensive, but that's something I'm concerned about when it comes to this type of play. However, I am happy seeing the Saboteur changes. It actually looks really good, unlike the changes they did to the Pathfinder, because the Pathfinder, to me, looks like they pretty much nerfed the entire class. I think that it's better if you read the Pathfinder yourself and make up your own mind about it, because I couldn't feel that they actually made a good change to this rework, but I think it's very subjective. So I don't want to dive into it too much and actually let you guys read it yourself and make up your own mind of if you think it's better change or not. However, leveling gems. There's been a lot of changes with leveling gems. So to start with, the Onslaught support is just straight up removed. This is a gem that was only used for the leveling approach of the game. Now, it was only used by certain type of leveling builds and not anything else, which gave it an unfair advantage in terms of the early game progression of meta leveling speed, and this is now removed. But there's a lot of other leveling changes made. So such a thing as the Pierce support gem has now been moved over to the Tidal Island quest, for example, from Hailrake. And the problem with those things, or not problem, but the impact of those changes is that it suddenly might not be worth muling those for certain race components, depending on the type of builds you want to play with. However, when it comes to the leveling of the early stage, I'm actually very happy to see a heavy change to these things, because it's been kind of dull using the same thing for so long and having this meta around the leveling speed of early stages. Now, for minions, it's fine because of some minor buffs we see to melee splash, giving us more damage to collateral splash damage from that support gem in the early stages. So I think it's kind of nice using SRS early on, or even Absolution. They're going to be more than fine early on, especially with the addition of VAAL Absolution, if you manage to get one of those early on. But outside of that, I'm actually very happy with the leveling changes because it's going to shake up the meta a little bit. I'm actually very curious to see how effective lightning tendrils will be for single target with an Orb of Storms, because of the increased damage that it has in the early stages. And instead of the stronger pulse that it does every 4th pulse, it will happen every 3. And instead of more damage, it would just always crit. So I'm very curious to see how this will actually work out. If it's something we're going to play with, it's going to be fun to play with something else and something new. It's refreshing. So I'm very happy with these changes. I know some people might not be, but I'm actually welcoming these changes personally. Another thing to mention is Arcane Surge. Now, Arcane Surge got some significantly cool changes, which is for a lot of builds a little bit detrimental, because they are removing the more spell damage component to it and adding instead the increased cast speed. Now, for some builds, this is a significant buff. Now, I mentioned Dark Pact before, and Dark Pact is now getting a stupid amount of buffs from this for a large variety of reasons. One of them being the fact that more damage is not something that Dark Pact is always looking for, but rather cast speed, because of how big of an impact cast speed have when it comes to clear speed, but also DPS output. There's a few things happening with Dark Pact specifically. I'm going to show you a POB right here, and that is the fact that the Chaos Mastery here, giving you increased effect of Withered, is going to be removed. They're also nerfing Corruption. We increased Withered by 20%, I believe it was, down to a much lower number, obviously. So in this case, we're going to have some damage drop from the Arcane Surge to the Dark Pact on top of those changes, but instead we're getting a ton of cast speed. This means that our DPS output should be significantly increased, and that also means our clear speed is increased on those of you that plays Dark Pact, which in my opinion is one of the strongest builds in this entire game. But because of its niche playstyle approach, not that many people are playing it, and since not enough people are playing it, GGG are simply not warranting a nerf to it. And I do want to recommend looking into Arcane Capacitor. Obviously, I'll be updating my build guide when time comes. Outside of that, there's a couple of other defensive nerfs which is the Molten Shell nerfs. So Molten Shell has a cap of 10,000 damage mitigation. This is now changed to only scale 10% of your armor instead of 20% and caps at 5,000. The VAAL Molten Shell has the same approach with 20% of your armor instead of 30, but instead of capping at 30,000, it's capped at 10,000. So the VAAL Molten Shell and Molten Shell has been significantly hit with a big nerf hammer. On the other hand, it is, with these changes, more in line with other guard skills, which was the intent of the nerf. Is it good? Is it bad? Too early to tell. I'm actually happy to see some changes with people maybe using something else for once. So I actually do welcome some of these nerfs to create a different way of playing the game than we have been for many, many years now. So there's a really cool change when it comes to minions again, and that is the animate weapon. They've had an AI issue for the longest of time, which made them randomly pause or when they're moving or attacking, which is causing an inconsistent damage output, but also a lot of less damage output or DPS output for single targets. Very noticeable when you're playing a poison version of this, which is one of the main issues I had personally when trying to make Animate Weapon compete with the Poison SRS in the 3.20 Sanctum League. Now, I was able to do so on paper, but because of how they work and actually being attackable, this caused some issues. This is now being fixed, but they are lowering the damage by about 10%, and also the increased attack speed is also lowered by about 10%. Now, less attack speed, because it's a more attack speed modifier. These changes should compensate reasonably for the AI changes, but it's impossible for us to tell if the numerical values of these nerfs are equivalent to the change of the AI until we actually test it. But for now, we're just gonna have to assume that it's fine, because it's actually a really cool build, and I'm looking forward to do some cool things with this, with the VAAL Animate Weapon. But I can't say much more than that, because we don't know the exact details of how the VAAL Animate Weapon will look like. Same thing goes with the VAAL Dominating Blow. However, the VAAL Absolution is in the list, and we could talk about this a little bit, and that is basically the fact that a VAAL Absolution is doing tons more damage, but not really sure how well that's going to play out. But we'll talk about that in just a little bit. Something I do want to tackle first is Book of Regression. So the Book of Regression is basically a way for you to down level your character. They're now no longer allowing you to have this. This was one of the cheesy mechanics you could go through to allow you to have an infinite running of heist. Fuck all heisters, go fuck yourself. This is done. We're all happy to see this change. Other than that, the last topic will basically be the VAAL Absolution. So let's just head over to this page and we'll go to Absolution. And it is down here. So VAAL Absolution, as you can see at the bottom screen here, it has a base duration of 15 seconds, a soul gain prevention of 30 seconds. And what it does, it will take one of your existing Absolution Sentinels and ascend it to the heavens. And it becomes super juiced, and basically it just takes some Giga Chad juice in its veins and goes fucking bananas. The problem with this is that it is a Absolution minion that deals 200% more damage, and you can only have one active at any given time, and it also takes less damage. After you have ascended one, you are able to re-summon through the other means, the regular summoning Absolutions, to get 3 of the regular ones on top of your ascended one. However, a lot of people think that this is supposed to be used for uber bosses or for bossing in general. Now, the problem with Absolution is not damage. Absolution does a stupid amount of damage. You can make Absolution one-shot zeros with enough gear, 2-shot in half-ass gear. It's not very hard. The problem with Absolution is having the build designed in a way where it can survive long enough to summon those minions to do the damage. So it's a bit of a balance act between offensive and defensive when it comes to this. But the biggest problem with VAAL skills versus high-end game bosses is how the VAAL souls are actually collected versus boss fights. The TLDR of this is that every increment of 5% damage dealt to a boss will give you a set amount of souls. This means that if the boss has 100% HP and you deal up to 9% damage to the boss, it will then bypass that first increment of 5% and you collect souls of that 5% that you just hit. However, if you deal enough damage to bring the boss from 100% down to, say, 40% HP in one hit, which Absolution can very well do, you're bypassing tons of those soul collections. You only get one set of souls from it, which is stupid. So I don't think this is something you want to use for bossing, which is odd to me why they gave it more damage, but you know, I'll take it. I'd rather see more cast speed on it. However, the VAAL Absolution Ascended version here it has tons of other abilities, one being a massive AoE absolution hit. The other one is seemingly a lot of small hits happening on the screen, which is really cool to see, because those things are actually attractive, because those will increase your generic clear speed with the build, using it as a clear speed enhancer rather than single target bossing. Obviously, you can definitely use this for something like bossing in maps and whatnot, but not so much for uber bosses, if you will. That's all I have to say about the absolution so far. Obviously, I'll be making some more content leading up to the leak release. For those of you who missed it, for about a week ago, I had my firstborn daughter. Just became a father, and because of that, I will be having rather limited strings here and there to go through all the information, but I will make sure that all the guys are updated, and I'll be posting as much content as I can here on YouTube. And I hope you guys will have a great league start, and I'll catch you guys in the next video or on a stream. So till then, make sure you like and subscribe to the video and comment down below. It helps the YouTube algorithm bullshit. Anyways, stay safe and keep rocking.